Okay, so I'm going to say what I learned, what I did, and just kind of go over that whole process here in this video. So I created a 4-track EP, um, and once I had declared that I was going to make an EP, I called him, or the guy I was working with, and long story short, he agreed to do it. And so I immediately went in to continue to make beats. And then we would meet twice a week. And then him and I would kind of talk and say what we've been doing. And he would tell me, like, I like this one, but I want to hear more of this. And then so we would depart, and then I would continue to work, and we would meet up. And that process would continue up until time to track or record vocals. And most of the beats that we ended up using were actually beats that I was making on the day he was arriving, which is really interesting because I'm thinking the whole time I'm making all these, I'm thinking like, oh, this is going to be the one. But in reality, he used pretty much every beat we had chosen. I had made it that day, which is really, really cool to me. So I got to make a beat that day and then record on it also, which is really, really cool. Now, some do's and don'ts in the studio are things that I learned. You learn how to set up a hearback system. You learn how to use Pro Tools in the studio with a patch bay and a mixing board. You also get to see and test what different microphones sound like. Positioning them differently, putting them in a different spot in the room can make them sound different. But some of the do's and don'ts, though. So when you are deciding like what microphone to use, just try a bunch of them out. To be honest, you'll never really know which one is the best one. You really have to experiment with a bunch of them. So don't really think too hard about that. That's not really something that's going to cause you any issues. They all sound great. They're all professional microphones. So don't stress there. Understand that troubleshooting is going to be one of your number one tasks. You're going to deal with a lot of problems. You're dealing with technology. So, of course, it's never going to go right. Pretty much every single time I went to the studio, there was always something that I had to deal with. That being something maybe like the hearback system not working or Pro Tools not working properly. And believe me, it's very, very frustrating in the beginning, and it can be very, very demotivating. But if you're willing to bear the load and deal with it and figure a way out how to solve it, you will be very, very thankful because it will teach you a lot pertaining to engineering, specifically audio engineering. And also when you are tracking, make sure that you have the volume on your end or in the control room turned down. You do not want any of that bleeding over into the next room where the microphone is, or that's going to be a very, very serious problem for you later on down the road. Also, tell your artist to turn their headphones down, or their headphones will bleed into the microphone. And if you're using a really, really sensitive microphone, that's going to be, that's not going to be good. Let's just put it that way. And then, upon all of that, I then moved into mixing the beats. And so mixing was very interesting because I made the beat, so I already mixed it, right? Or so I thought I mixed it. But once you get in a studio with professional sounding speakers and you got 2 sets of them, you start to realize that there's some things you can't really hear in headphones. So I learned that mixing with speakers or monitors is very, very key when you are making music pertaining to what I was, because I was using 808s and kicks and real low energy sounds. And so you need something that can emit that type of frequency, or you're going to mismix your beat and it will not sound good. Also, I had to deal with an 808 a good bit, which is a really big drum that causes a lot of low end frequency, like a rumble, if you would, like thunder almost. And so to be able to tame that sound, you really, really have to essentially fine tune it to where you're slowly just removing it out of the song little by little, because I had to come way off of mine or from originally where the beat was. And since I made the beat, I wanted that sound to be heard the most. Therefore, I turned it up the loudest. But in reality, you don't have to do that. And I'm not going to go on that spiel because that's going to take up too much time. But long story short, I learned how to use tools in order to control, certain sounds within music. And then after I liked where the mix was in all my beats, I then moved to the mastering phase, or basically just making it louder and sound good across multiple platforms. So this process was really interesting to me because I used a company called Lander. And Lander is a mastering company that can take your beat or your song and master it for you in like 45 seconds. You just sit there and you wait. It gives you an example or a little taste, and you can either buy it for a flat fee of $6 or pay a subscription for, I think, somewhere in the ballpark of around $11 or $19 for the upgraded package, if you're willing to commit to something like that. So that's much cheaper also than paying a mixing engineer, because I promise you they're not going to take $6 an hour. Believe that. That's not that cheap. So I think you win financially here as well by mastering your beat through AI, because it's going to save you money, and it's essentially done by a professional. So you win there too. However, one downside to getting artificial intelligence to master your beat is it is going to clip the hell out of it. And the only reason I knew that is because in the studio they have a PPM, or what is known as a peak program meter, which can essentially read the overall volume of your music or your song and tell you if it's clipping or not visually through color. And so once I realized that, I knew I couldn't turn it in if it was clipping, because I knew I would hear about it from Jeff. And so what I then did is I put that mastered session from the AI in Pro Tools and mastered it myself. And all that means is I just turned the volume down a little bit to where it wasn't clipping as much. And then I put some compression on it to kind of help out with the boosted levels. And I also think I removed a little bit of EQ on it, which is essentially what mastering is anyway. So it was essentially mastered twice. But the AI's master was so good and it made it so loud that I knew I could use it. All I had to do was just turn it down some. So that is pretty much how I went about everything. Overall, this process was amazing. It helped me out tremendously, from the writing of the papers to the doing the research to learning about pre-production, production, and post-production, working with an artist. Excuse me. And, just showing myself what it takes to make art, really, or what I would want to do in the future, potentially. So, yeah. Again, thank you for the course.